Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Thank you all so much for joining us. I am just going to give things just a few more seconds to uh, allow people into the Zoom room. Thank you so much for joining us today. Great. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you all so much for joining us. I am so thrilled to be here with you to talk a little bit about exploring the Master of Divinity program here at Harvard Divinity School. My name is Margaret Okada Sheck. I'm the Associate Director of Admissions here at HDS. And this evening, I will be providing a very brief presentation about HDS and the MDiv program. And then I'm going to sort of let my panelists and the moderator take it away to give you all a sense of what the Master Divinity program here at Harvard Divinity School is all about. So Harvard Divinity School was founded in 1816 as the first divinity school in the United States. Now it is the most religiously pluralistic divinity school in the world. We have students coming from all of the world's major religious traditions, as well as students that have no religious tradition. Um, our goal is to educate students in the academic study of religion in preparation for ethical leadership, religious literacy, and service-oriented, mission-driven work. And we envision to provide an intellectual home where scholars from around the globe teach the world's religions in service of a just world at peace. So that's a little bit about HDS. And now I want to talk specifically about the Master Divinity School here. So if you are interested in pursuing an MDiv at the world's most religiously pluralistic divinity school, it is a unique place to pursue this degree. The MDiv here is the terminal professional degree of the divinity school. Just like you have law schools have JDs and medical schools have MDs, the Master of Divinity or MDiv is the terminal professional degree here. The program is where you'll learn the art of ministry, which includes the ethical leadership, preaching, pastoral care, community organizing, and so much more. Students are able to link theory and practice with practical field experience in a wide variety of settings. This program does have institutional grant aid available. And just sort of by the numbers, you should know it is a 3-year full-time degree, and it is residential. We do not offer an online program. There's only 3 required courses in this program, which really enables students to have all the classes across HDS and across Harvard University at their fingertips, to really craft a unique academic journey for themselves that supports their ultimate goals, whatever they may be. There are 2 required field education placements, although some people choose to do more. And then there is a language requirement, not to enter the program, but during the course of the program. And that is one of the sort of really awesome benefits of choosing to do your MDiv here at such an academically rigorous and rich place. Our faculty are really remarkable, and we have 82 research professors and faculty, visiting faculty and others offering instruction. 42% of which specialize in non-Christian religious tradition, really living in and through the not only the academic study of religion in all of the world's all of the 5 major religious traditions found in the world. Our curriculum is incredibly flexible. Students are able to take classes, half of their classes outside of Harvard Divinity School. So here at HDS, you'd have over 200 classes every single year to really appeal to a broad spectrum of interests. Um, in addition, students are able to cross-register across 8 of the other Harvard graduate schools, including the Harvard Faculty of Arts and Sciences, which is where the Department of Anthropology or Sociology or Psychology reside. As well as, Harvard Law School, Harvard Kennedy School of Government, Harvard Business School, Harvard Chan School of Public Health. And then if that's not enough, Boston and Cambridge are incredibly rich places to be able to pursue your graduate education. We're one of the 10 schools within the Boston Theological Interreligious Consortium, which includes Boston University or Boston College, St. John's Seminary, Holy Cross, Hebrew College. And it really enables students to create such a rich academic pathway for themselves. We always say that no two students have the same transcript, and that is absolutely the case. So what do students do? What do grads do? We get this question a lot. This is just a smattering of different titles that you would be able to find of different alumni. The Office of Career Services here at Harvard Divinity School really focuses on supporting students and alumni, um, both while they are currently on their journeys as well as beyond. I actually just attended a really cool event today just for HDS students that was moderated by our dean on networking at professional conferences, which for those who are interested in pursuing potentially a PhD and entering in academia, what a wonderful opportunity to hear from the dean and some other faculty about, what are some ways to do that. So, um, I hope that helps to give an overview a little bit about the sort of the academic nuts and bolts of things. I'm sure Dean Teddy and others will be able to provide more flavor and around that. So now I'm going to speak a little bit about the application process. Um, so if you are interested in entrance in fall to 2026, that application is now available. The application components are as you see it right here. We require, the form, the statement of purpose, a resume, academic transcripts, 3 letters of recommendation, one of which for MDiv applicants has to be speaking of your ministerial promise, which is incredibly broad. So someone who can support what your vision of ministry is. There is a supplemental essay as well as an interview that is required. The timeline is as you see it. The application, we only have one cycle. So that application is now open and the deadline is January 5th. It is a final deadline, so we require all application materials to be in by that date. We require interviews and those invitations will be sent out anywhere between late January to early March. It's a long process. In addition, we strongly recommend all MDiv applicants apply for institutional financial aid, which that application gets sent out mid to end of January, and the deadline is usually in February. We release all decisions by mid-March, and for those that are admitted, have until April 15th, 2026 to respond to our offer of admission. I just want to talk briefly about financial aid as well. As I mentioned previously, institutional grant aid is available for the Master of Divinities program. 90% of our students in the MTS and MDiv programs do receive institutional grant aid or scholarships. The vast majority of which is need-based aid, and that requires the HDS financial aid application, which is why we really encourage all MDiv applicants to fill it out. For need-based aid, there are 3 levels that are offered. Just on need, which is a 3/4 tuition grant, a full tuition grant, and a full tuition grant and a modest stipend. And this does require the financial aid application. For a very small group of MTS and MDiv applicants, we do offer merit aid. These merit aid packages generally do include a full tuition grant and a modest stipend. And there is absolutely nothing anybody needs to do to be considered for merit aid. It is based solely on the strength of your application within the context of the whole applicant pool. And so we always just recommend folks to be considered for merit aid, just do your best with your application for admission, and you will automatically be considered for merit aid. Folks will know they receive merit award at the time of their admission, and which is final. And so once you get an admission decision from us, and should you be admitted, you would know also in that admit letter that if you were awarded a merit award. So I know that was a lot, but I promise you there's a lot more events that are happening that have been either recorded previously or are on the docket. So please do come back and um, sign up for more events to hear more from admissions or from any other folks. So for now, I would love it if my colleague, Dean Teddy Hickman Maynard, would be able to turn on camera. As well as our student panelists. If you can all turn on your cameras, that would be great. And it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Dean Teddy Hickman Maynard, who is our Associate Dean for Ministry Studies, as well as a lecturer on ministry. If you can please take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Margaret, and welcome to all of you who are joining us. I think we have over 130 folks joining us on this webinar, so it's quite a good group. And I'm delighted to have with me 4 incredible students in the Master of Divinity program. I'm going to say at the outset that we received a lot of questions from you all that we're not going to be able to answer all tonight. But I want you to know that you can email me at any time and I will respond to you. The admissions team will be able to give you my information. But tonight is really about hearing from our students. I really want you all to get a flavor for MDiv students, the diversity of their interests, their backgrounds, their approaches to learning, their understandings of ministry, and their experiences here while in school. And so the most important thing is for you to hear from them. So I'm going to ask some pretty general questions at the beginning that I want each of them to address. And then we'll get into some of the questions that you all submitted in advance, and we'll do that popcorn style and see if we can get a number of those questions in. So what I'm going to ask for the 4 panelists is if you could each introduce yourself by answering the following question. What drew you to Harvard Divinity School? And how did you end up choosing the MDiv program? So I'm going to start with one of you, and then I want you to pass the mic to each other as you feel so led. And so I want to start with Bobby, if you would start first. What drew you to Harvard Divinity School, and why did you choose the MDiv program?
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be on this panel today. And so I'm Bobby. I'm a 3rd-year MDiv. And I was drawn to the program because of its pluralistic nature. I tell people I'm an animist. And so while I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Christian, but I could say that about every religion. And so there's this entree of wisdom traditions that Harvard offers that's just, you're not going to find it anyplace else. You're going to get African religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, it's all there, eco-theology, which is my focus. So that for someone who's an animist and sees the sacred in all of the wisdom traditions, this was just the perfect fit. There wasn't any place else that I could attend, really. So I'm honored to be at Harvard. And I am going to pass the mic to Lillian.
Thank you, Bobby. Hi, everyone. My name is Lillian Carr. I am a 2nd-year Master of Divinity candidate. So what drew me to Harvard, also similar to Bobby, I appreciated the fact that though I am a Christian, there were several denominations and like so many different perspectives that I would be able to gain from attending Harvard Divinity School. A lot of the other seminaries and divinity schools that we're looking at specifically focused on Christian thinkers and learners. But I wanted the opportunity to not only be challenged in my thinking, but be surrounded by people who thought differently and had different experiences so that we could figure out ways to cultivate our experiences together as one and unite around those to enhance our academic environment. So I've had an amazing time at Harvard and I hope that I get to see some of you all soon. I'm going to pass to Jordan.
Hi, everybody. My name's Jordan Ahmed. I am a second year MDiv. And what drew me, I actually have some friends who attended Harvard Divinity School. I have friends who were both MDivs many years back, and some friends who graduated with an MTS more recently. And seeing how they engaged with HDS, especially I'm Muslim. I'm also a part of a community of queer and trans Muslims here in Boston, and seeing that Harvard Divinity School is a place where they were able to do really rigorous academic study and also, be able to be a queer trans Muslim in such a prestigious religious environment, and to be able to really study and deepen their scholarship with a lot of also like social and spiritual support really heartened me to a program like HDS. And I think what drew me to the MDiv specifically was the knowing that I would be able to be doing scholarship alongside having a foot in the field. So the field education piece and this sense of keeping myself grounded in my lived experience of my religion and my community alongside my academic pursuits. So even while I've been here at HDS, I've been developing with peers outside of the school a mosque that's housed at Union Church, where it's run by queer and trans Muslims here in the area. So I've still been able to do work outside of just my scholarship here, and I feel like that's been a really important piece. This semester, I'm actually also working as a chaplain intern in the Office of Religious and Spiritual Life. So I feel like it's constantly been a really fruitful balance of academic study and practical experience, which as somebody who I'm in my 30s, I'd spent a lot of time outside of school, and I didn't want to lose that tether to like the real world or the professional world in that way. Yeah, and I will pass it over to Grace.
Thanks, Jordan. Hi, everyone. My name is Grace Gallagher. I'm also a second year in the MDiv program. My journey here was much stranger. I'm not religiously affiliated by any means, and my background is in biology and global sustainability. So it's kind of a shock to me even that I ended up in this humanities study of religion. But I truly believe that there's no other place that I could have this course of study. I do a lot of eco-theology. I do a lot of building relationships with more than human entities and doing ministry for non-human beings. So in a traditional MDiv program or Masters of Forestry program or Masters of Environmental Science program, I would not be like guaranteed to pursue study in that way. So I ended up coming to Harvard's Divinity School precisely because they offered study of spirituality and religion from a non-religiously affiliated background, and that I could bring my own biology background, take classes across Harvard. I think every semester I've taken at least one class not in the divinity school. I've really like relied on that to like take a music class this semester where I'm like gathering sounds from the river to give the river a voice in our like religious backgrounds. So I've been really enjoying the space and freedom I have to like build my own curriculum, take my own knowledge from previous studies and previous life experience, and build something that is ministry focused. I think Jordan spoke about this really well about being able to continue your pursuits through field ed in a really specific way. I'm actually working for the local watershed this year as my field ed experience. That was like a self-initiated placement that I'm really, really grateful that the administration was like excited about for me, and really encouraging for me to take ministry to rivers and forests and land really seriously.
Thank you all so much. Grace, I'm so glad that you finished with discussion of your field ed, because that was one of the areas that a lot of our registrants had questions about. And one of the things that makes the MDiv at Harvard Divinity School unique, almost every MDiv program you look at will have a field education component, or supervised ministry, they might call it, where you have to do work in the field as a part of your degree program. Many universities and theological seminaries require 1 unit, which is the equivalent of part-time work over the course of an academic year, or it can be an intensive experience where you're working full-time over 8 to 10 weeks, usually in the summer. Harvard Divinity School requires 2 units for all Master of Divinity students, and many of our Master of Divinity students also actually exceed that and do another unit. So I would love if the other 3 of you could follow Grace's lead and talk about what your field ed experiences have been and how they've contributed to your experience of the MDiv program. And we'll start with Lillian.
Yes. So the field education placement, or my field education placement, has definitely enhanced my experience. I've been super grateful to be able to work and serve with Pilgrim Rest Missionary Baptist Church. And so I did my first placement in the summer, or this past summer, and I'm currently doing my second placement. And I'm still working with Pilgrim Rest. Over the summer, I was in Alabama with Pilgrim Rest. Now I travel back maybe about twice a month, and I'm also doing a lot of like virtual work with the church itself. And so essentially, it just gives me the opportunity. I work directly with like women and youth. And so I have the opportunity to plan programming, speak or conduct spiritual counseling and guidance, and work directly with a lot of the people in which, or the congregants that need my care. And I do think it's very unique to my experience, as it allows me to place my learning in the classroom into action. And also, too, along with your field education placement, you take a meaning making course. And so that gives you the opportunity to work alongside students who might be working at other field education sites. So, for example, me and Jordan actually have our meaning making session together. And so we have the opportunity, you have the opportunity to connect a lot with the people in your cohort who are working at different sites and doing different things, which allows you to see just how multifaceted ministry can be.
Jordan, I heard her speak your name, so that means you're next.
Thank you. Yeah, so I mentioned before this year I waited to do my field placement until my second year. So this year I'm working as a chaplain intern in HDS's Office of Religious and Spiritual Life. And that internship, we really work on a lot of the events and programming around everything you can imagine with religious and spiritual life here at HDS, including supporting running the weekly noon service, which is a weekly service that's run by a different student group or religious organization every week, where folks get to sort of share their spiritual practice. That can look as diverse as having a sort of like improvised music experience, to having a more formal like service that's denominational. And also, as a chaplain intern, I get to sort of just I get to work with our student body. So the people I'm working with are my peers, which is a unique experience, and getting the chance to work in higher education in this very close way as somebody who's also a member of this community. And I actually knew that I wanted to do this placement from my first week of orientation last year, because I sort of saw how you really just get access to so much richness, and so many of the experiences that for me have been really fundamental here at HDS. Like I've gone to every single noon service that has happened in my year and some change so far. And like Lillian said, it's great to get to do something like meaning making, which was a class that at first I was like, I don't know how this is going to work. Like I'm like I didn't know if it was just sort of like one of those like requirement classes that just sort of very clearly like meets a requirement. But instead it has been like, we just started a few weeks ago really meeting as a group, and it's already been a space to start processing some of the experiences we're having in the field that can be as diverse as other people who are trying to process what it means to have one of their clients die while they're working in hospital chaplaincy, to people processing other experiences in the field. So yeah, I really love being a part of RSL, and especially as somebody who has done a lot of other service-oriented work as a special education teacher or as a community organizer, it feels really exciting to dive into that in a more religious, spiritual context. I'll pass it over to Bobby.
Thanks, Jordan. So I'm a non-traditional student. I'm coming in having done, 20 years, 20 plus years of service and ministry type work. And so when I began to think about field placement, it was really important for me to be able to think, okay, what is it that I haven't done? What is it that I would like to nurture within myself? And so right out the gate, my first year, I joined in national organization of Hindu chaplains. And the purpose of that was just to learn Dharma and, to practice, learn something new and be a part of an organization that I could serve while I'm also learning. So there was this sort of both and, I get to serve, and it was online. So I'm serving and I'm also receiving religious education. And so that was a very rich experience. And then the next thing, what's beautiful about the field placements at Harvard is that if you can make and justify, have a good argument, you can have a self-directed field placement under supervision. And so this past summer, I did all of my hours because part of my ministry that I would like to nurture, very similar to Grace, is around eco-theology and how do we see the sacred in the earth and see the personhood in the earth. And so I did that through a podcast. And so I taught myself how to do podcasts and spent hours and hours researching and doing all of this under supervision. And I also did a healing practice as well as a part of that to make sure I was getting all of my hours and meeting. And so, the meaning making is I had that my first year. You only have that once, your first year field placement. And then the second during and the field placement was the full first year for me. And then I followed it up in the summer with a second field placement. And I was able to get all of my hours in. I was able to you have to meet with your supervisor every week for an hour for spiritual, what is it called? Spiritual development. And so that was a rich experience as well. That's, for me, that's one of the highlights, is being able to have these conversations with people who are in the field. And so, yeah, I would say that the field placement, there's a lot of places that you can apply to. In the Boston area, some of my friends, they were ministers this summer. They went and they took over somebody's church and they were ministering this summer. And so you hit the ground running. So it's like when you're beginning to, thinking about field placement, really think about, this can be a launching pad for your ministry. And it's really, the podcast I'm now doing as an independent study this year. It's continuing on. So yeah, I think it's one of the highlights of the program.
So another major question that people have asked is why the MDiv in particular, right? So we've been talking about why HDS, why is Harvard Divinity School such a unique place? But between these two degrees, people often have difficulty in terms of discerning which is the right degree for them. We know that traditionally the Master of Divinity is the degree for people going into professional religious leadership. But here at Harvard Divinity School, we define ministry very broadly and a lot of different kinds of work through which people are trying to make a difference in the world and provide ethical and spiritual leadership in the world. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't believe any one of you four need an MDiv to actually get a job doing what it is you feel called to do. So given that, I would love if any of you or all of you could address what made the MDiv the right degree for you and what distinguishes your experience as an MDiv student from your MTS friends, many of whom care about the same things that you do. So what is that difference like from the student perspective?
I can answer. So for me, first of all, the reason that I chose an MDiv over MTS, one of the first reasons was that an MDiv is a terminal degree. And so when I was considering because I mean, it was appealing, 2 years versus 3. Yeah, like sign me up, actually. But as I started thinking more about it and more about what it was that I wanted to do in the ministerial space, and just to kind of like give you all a touch point, I thought I was going to be in law school right now, but man plans, and here we are. And so I knew that being especially like an African American woman going into or working in a ministerial space, that an education was going to be very important. And when I thought about all the components of the Master of Divinity degree and what it offered as opposed to the MTS, especially the fact that there were certain required courses that we take that the MTS students don't take. While they do have the opportunity to take those courses, it isn't a requirement. But also, too, in those courses being required, you're surrounded by students who are thinking in so many different ways, and you have the opportunity to have conversations about what it is that you are working on, what it is that you want to do. And the 3-year program actually gives you time to think and consider what it is that you might want to do. Because when you come into the program, like for me, I accepted my calling to ministry in 2023. And I thought that I was going to come to Harvard and get my license to minister and become an ordained minister. And while that is something that I'm still on track to do, I have now started to consider other options like consulting for churches and ensuring that they are establishing programs that are effective for our community, and that the church is remaining a community center and that it was intended to be way back when, right? And so while you're here in given more time, you'll have the opportunity to engage in so much more and learn more to ensure that you're equipped with the resources and the tools to do what it is that you want to do upon leaving HDS.
Grace, I saw you wanted to jump in on this one.
I think Lillian did like such a great job summing up the basic components of like why I also chose the MDiv, even though we have like different, I like goals and are using our time differently. It's like the time. And like many of my MTS students are like setting up for classes for their last semester, and we came in at the same time. And I'm like, oh, I need to start writing a thesis. And I'm excited about that thesis writing, right? So I think that Lillian like really hit the nail on the head there with talking about that time, the discernment process, and just the overall transformation that happens at a place like HDS. I'm not in a rush to do anything in life, so the 3 years does not seem that daunting. But for people like Lillian, maybe it is like kind of an extra year, takes more out of you before you go on to law school. So there's definitely pros and cons. But I couldn't imagine being an MTS.
I just want to jump in too to say that I feel like for me, to add on to what Grace and Lillian have said, I think something that I find more particularly among like fellow MDiv students is there's a real, we spend a lot of time on the spiritual and or personal development side of things. Like it's not only like deepening our research or our scholarship, which is something that happens a lot among MDivs just as much as MTS. Like we all have points of view that we're pursuing academically that aren't just about service, though they often are oriented toward service, or like how can we bring our research back to communities or back to supporting, helping people, or yeah, even thinking about the ways like Grace and Bobby have talked about eco-theology. But there's also this level of kind of space to process where you are at and what you believe or what you think and how you sort of want to orient yourself personally or spiritually towards the world. Like I feel like there's a different amount of just time for reflection is built into the MDiv in a way that the MTS is not. Even with things like the MDiv resulting in a thesis in your third year, that is the result of 3 years of personal reflection and building up, often from seeds that you plant in your intro to ministry studies class in your first semester. And I also see like there's just a different track. Like you can feel there's a different energy among MDivs and MTS, not in a bad way. Like we have so many friends across the programs, including like the Merple students. But I really feel like because we're in it for 3 years, there's a different investment in how we're going to grow together and spend time in different levels of personal transformation. Some people come to HDS having a stronger sense of like where they are with some of these things, and some students are coming directly from like undergrad, like there's just different places that we're all coming from. But I really appreciate the time for that level of reflection and the space for transformation in community with other people who are in their own process.
And just quickly, and this is a broad stroke, and it's not true for every situation, but a lot of MTS, because the MDiv is a terminal degree, a lot of MTS are also thinking about going to get the PhD, but a lot of MDivs are too. But I feel like within my cohort, I feel like a lot more were thinking about the doctoral. The MTS were more aligned in that direction, but that's not a total, I don't mean that to be a unified statement. And then one other just sort of nuts and bolts is if the MTS, there is sort of a required track. And Dean Teddy can speak to this more. I think there may be 6 options. There's a list of options, whereas with the MDiv, you choose your track, you decide. It's up to you.
Yeah, thank you all so much. I just want to add a couple of notes to what the students have said. A couple of things in the chat. First of all, Jordan, one of the prospective students says, thank you so much for the talk you gave during noon service on Prospective Students Day. The way that you talked about darkness transformed and nurtured a lot of what they had been feeling. So props to you, Jordan. And also, Bobby, people want to know what's the name of your podcast and is it available for us to listen to it? So you want to plug yourself real quick, Bobby?
Oh, the nerves. It is on, it's in the works, but it's on Spotify, and it's Remembrances for Being Earth and Spirit. And it's also on Apple as well. But I'm doing some adjustments, so no judgment.
So the thing I wanted to add is that the way I describe it, there was a question in the registration from you all about, are you taking classes together? The answer is yes. The answer is most of the time in most Harvard Divinity School classes, you are together with people from other programs, right? So there are rarely classes that are just for MDivs or just for MTS or just for Merple is Masters of Religion and Public Life, by the way. Some of you, we have a lot of acronyms here. So the Masters in Religion and Public Life, these are professionals who come for a 1-year degree to add religious literacy to what they're already doing in different fields, whether it's entertainment or journalism or education or business or law or economics. So these 3 master's programs, you're taking classes together all the time. And in addition, Harvard Divinity School supports our PhD in religion at the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. So you've got PhD students, you've got undergrad people who are concentrated in religion, you've got all 3 master's programs all in the same room. So a lot of times what distinguishes people from what distinguishes an MDiv from an MTS is not the class you're taking, but what you bring with you into that classroom and what you're trying to get out of that class. And that's what gets developed in the very few requirements that MDivs have that MTSs don't. So the first year you have Introduction to Ministry Studies. That's where you develop your concept of ministry. What is it for you? How are you developing yourself as a leader or as a practitioner within your field? Meaning making is another discussion-oriented class that goes along with your field ed. And then in the third year, you have your senior seminar, where again, you're broken down into small groups. This will be a running theme, right? We figure out ways to make sure you are in small groups with other MDiv students throughout your program so that all day long I'm with everybody else in my classes, but I have that home base of a small group of MDiv students to come back to talk about, okay, how are you feeling about things? And what does this do for us? And another thing I say a lot of times is that in the MTS, you are there to master a subject or area of study, right? So you choose an area, whether it's a particular religious tradition or a particular theme or a particular geographical area. Whereas in the MDiv, the object of study is the crafting of your own soul and the formation of your own capacity for service. So you're not there to master a topic, you're there to form yourself. And that's probably the biggest difference. Okay, I want to jump back to the students. And another question people had was, what has surprised you the most about Harvard Divinity School? And along with that, I would say, what has been most challenging? So those are two related but potentially different questions, because you could have been surprised by something really great. So anybody want to tackle that? What's been very surprising, you didn't expect it? And also what's been challenging? Jordan?
Thanks, Dean Teddy. Also, just want to note, Dean Teddy is amazing. Dean Teddy is my academic advisor, so you get to work with amazing professors and mentors like Dean Teddy. So all of us are very interconnected. So yeah, just wanted to note that. Something that I'll start with what is challenging and then build into what surprised me. I think in addition to what you expect to be challenging about grad school, as far as like workload and work-life balance and social life, all of those things are, of course, challenging, as we all can expect. But I think something that's challenging, particularly about the MDiv track that I sort of alluded to a little bit earlier with talking about like spiritual personal development, is it can be like there's a lot that comes up. Like that's an activating thing to be investigating yourself, to be investigating what you're invested in, what you believe in, and to be surrounded by people who are in that process who are not arriving at the same conclusions as you. So you, for me, it's really been about being like trying to find balance among something that will never actually be balanced. So like, how do you orient yourself and improvise with this kind of moving structure where I'm growing, I'm transforming, I'm figuring out and sort of solidifying parts of my belief system, my foundation, what I'm interested in. And then also there's a lot of like influencing factors that are constantly shifting. And yeah, that can be really activating. It can be emotional. And also there's a lot of potential for really deep transformation. Like I'll say that like, even for me, my personal spiritual religious beliefs were really strengthened in my first semester and have continued to be so through some of the academic classes that I was not expecting to provide that sort of structure to, including like a class about a French philosopher. Like I was not expecting that class to really make me feel firm in my belief in God, but it did. And the thing that I would say that I'm surprised by and where I've taken a lot of comfort, I have a background as a poet and a dancer in addition to some of my other my former professional lives. And I found a lot of creative artistic community and opportunity here. So I've written a lot of poems for classes. I've taken classes at the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, where I've been able to take classes with poets who I studied in undergrad more than 10 years ago. Who, like Tracy K. Smith, anybody who's a poetry fan, she's incredible. As a Div School student, I'm able to apply and register for those sorts of workshops outside of the Divinity School. I've also taken a dance class last semester. So, and then in addition to student groups that provide a lot of that artistic, creative space for me here at the Divinity School, including a writing group that's called 300 Words, So there are things I expected coming to HDS that I have found, including like this like sort of interrogation of self and spiritual growth, but also I was not anticipating really coming back to myself as a creative artistic person. And HDS is real, like I sometimes will joke that sometimes it feels like I'm getting an MFA, like a Master of Fine Arts in God. And I say that with a lot of affection and pride. Like it really feels good to be able to do that.
Anybody else want to jump in on that question?
Yeah, I can jump in as well. I think that being religiously unaffiliated at a divinity school automatically just has some challenges. And some of those surprises have been good. But the challenging part with a pluralistic institution like this is that everyone's coming from such a different space, and sometimes there can be no center. Because everyone is coming with their own backgrounds and with their own like beautiful ideas about who God is or whether or not God exists or whether or not there are many gods, like sometimes it can feel a little bit like, well, no one thinks what I think, or like I'm the only one doing XYZ. And at first, especially in my first semester, I was really struck with this challenge of like, well, what is everyone else like? And you kind of get trapped in this like trying to find the center of an institution that is really intending everyone to be in their own space. And like really encouraging that pluralism sometimes can be disorienting at the beginning. But the surprise has been that I end up in classes like I'm looking at a Buddhism class on friendship next semester, and like I never would have thought that I would take a class on Buddhism, and I'm really excited to learn about friendship. And because there's no like central practice, I've heard really great things about Professor Hallisey kind of expanding what it means to study Buddhism in that specific way. So the challenge of like introducing and coming into a place where there's such a like large array of different opinions and not knowing how your own opinions, especially being unaffiliated, fit in with that pluralism, it can be a little disorienting at first. But I think that once you speak to this, and I remember Dean Teddy speaking directly to this in one of our IMS sections, it was like, okay, I can take a big, deep breath and I can then see what conversations I can create with people of different backgrounds, how this pluralism can actually be a benefit, and how in each classroom I find the center within that group of people. And as Dean Teddy also said earlier, we find ourselves in small groups a lot. My largest class at HDS right now is 6 people. So I am in a lot of small classroom spaces, doing a lot of this navigating where we align, and then having those nuanced discussions about that pluralistic background. So I think that that has been a little challenging. And then finally, once I felt comfortable in that, really sweetly surprising.
Yeah, I ditto to what Grace and Jordan said. And just the only thing to sort of add is along with that sort of especially when you're coming in as not having a particular organized spiritual set, is that the menu of classes that you can take, it's so immense. And so, and the encouragement is, and I remember, back in, I think maybe it was 2022 when I was on like I was like you all, and I was sitting on the other side of the screen. Someone saying is just like, the hard thing is going to be to focus. You're going to have to figure out a focus. And I think the first year and a half, I just bounced around in different classes, didn't have a whole lot of focus. I found some classes that would be sort of just an anchor. Every now and then I'd find, okay, this is an anchor class. And then by the second, like halfway through, I began to find, okay, this is where I belong. All right, these are the classes, this is my focus. And then the thing so that's kind of the challenge. And the surprise is, and it's not so much a surprise, it is, I want to again sort of just emphasize what Jordan said around the nurturing of the creative aspect. They really encourage you to be creative. So that was sort of a relief as someone who's been in academia a long time, is just done with papers. Like, boy, I get to, do all of these creative things. So that was a surprise, but one of the gifts of the Harvard Divinity School is the community. So the community of your peers, they, for me, have become sort of my anchoring group. And so just right out the gate, I remember again, being listening to a panel and one of the people saying this, like, the community is really what really helps to support you. And then someone else saying, and like, I wish that I had, been a part of a community. And I listened to that person because I'm one of the most introverted introverts that has ever introvert. And it was just like, I am going to listen to this person who said they regretted not being a part of community and make sure that I do nurture community. And it has been a gift. So that has been a surprise. Just the goodness, that exudes out of all of your peers. That's something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lillian. Sorry.
Oh no. So yeah, for me, I think what surprised me was the plethora of class offerings that you have, because as a student at Harvard, you're able to take classes within the Harvard network. And so if you want, you can take a class at the Kennedy School or the business school or the law school or the ed school if there's room in the class and it's available for cross registration. And I knew that, you could take classes like, at other schools, but I didn't realize there would be so many different classes that you could take. And also that your schedule, especially like as an MDiv candidate, would allow for you to try out so many different classes. Like Dean Teddy is also my advisor. And the other day we were talking about my courses and I'm like, well, what do I need to do? And he's like, really, you could do anything right now. And so that freedom is great to be able to have, because it's like, if I want to go take a dance class or I want, whatever I want, like I kind of have the opportunity to do. And what was challenging, I would say, not necessarily like the workload, but life happening my first year. I actually transitioned to HDS directly from undergrad. And so I'm like one of the youngest people in my cohort. And last year, I just had a lot going on. I had multiple deaths in my family. I had this skin rash. It was like I was allergic to Boston. And I'm like, what is going on? And also, too, like, I'm from the South. And so, yeah, the weather and the way that it's 6 o'clock now, which is, right now it's fine. But at a certain point at 3 o'clock, it's dark. And I'm looking outside like it is 3 o'clock and I'm not going to bed for whoever knows how many hours. And it's dark outside. And so for me, that was really difficult because like I enjoy walking and I enjoy doing, but like, when it's dark, it's not necessarily safe to do that. And so I would say like and as I grew up a military child, so that's how like it really was a difficult transition because it's like I've moved around everywhere, but being in this space where I wasn't necessarily surrounded by my family, I didn't have like a lot of like I moved to a city where I didn't know anybody, and so I would say like that was the most challenging thing for me and adjusting to this new normal that I have to exist in for the next 3 years.
So we're coming down to the end of our time together, and I'm so sorry. There were so many good questions that we're not going to be able to get to, but I do think that you've gotten an opportunity to hear some of the flavor and the sort of richness of life here among our students and some of the diversity that exists in terms of age, stage of life, previous background, vocational aspirations. So in our last couple of minutes, I would just love to go around the circle again and ask you all to give one piece of advice to those who are considering this next step. What would be helpful for them to think about or ask themselves as they consider potentially coming to Harvard Divinity School?
Okay. So I would say one piece of advice that I have is to be authentic and be true to yourself in your application. Like, I think when people are applying to, especially like a place like Harvard, you think, oh, I have to make it sound so good and have this like super articulated response in my statement of purpose and my letters of rec. You at the end of the day, you just have to be authentic to yourself and your calling and your purpose. And I promise you will get to the exact point that you are supposed to be. At the end of the day, like this, like you've seen throughout all of, our presentations today, like we have completely different experiences, but somehow like we all are able to work in this space together as one. And so your experience is unique to yourself. And so don't lose that authenticity, stay true to you, and remain purposeful within that space.
I can kind of pick up where Lillian left off and just say, I think some of that authenticity can come with leaning into what is like specific and particular about your experience and what you're looking to do and bring. And I say this both as you're thinking about your application, but also this is advice I give to new students here is follow the particular and the specific paths. It can feel weird to take a class that's like really hyper specific about one figure who maybe you don't know very well, but some of those pathways open up more of that, like the big ideas can sometimes be unlocked through something like really small. Like sometimes it can be like, oh, I didn't get into this like class that I really wanted, and maybe it was something more general, or it was about a faith tradition that you like really told yourself you're going to take a class in, but you end up in this specific seminar about some figure or some like really niche topic. Like right now I'm taking a class called apocalyptic grief, and sometimes it's those specifics, whether it's in what you're pursuing or in how you present yourself, that really allow for points of connection and new opportunities and discovery. So that's something I would suggest.
I think my piece of advice is maybe just a little bit more practical and maybe a little bit counterintuitive. I read so much right before I came to HDS. Like I was reading a lot. And I think I received a lot of advice to like, oh, don't read so much before because grad school you're going to be so busy. I love reading. I was reading for fun. I was reading books that I thought would be important for what I was going to study, like having no clue really what the syllabus would look like. I was just like wanting to have some sort of like a basis or intention for what I was preparing myself for and like coming in like, okay, I just read this book, Pollution is Colonialism. How am I going to use that from like my life and like what I've done before being in class so that when it's brought up maybe by chance in class or I can use it as a sounding board for these other conversations I'm having. I thought it was so important that I just spent like a whole summer and I had time and I was really grateful that I had time to do that, to just like read so much.
And I guess the only thing I would say is that you're in the discernment process of purpose. And so sort of just trust the discernment and allow yourself to, have a goal, but allow that goal to have some openness as well, to just allow yourself to be open to what that discernment may bring you.
I want to thank Bobby, Grace, Jordan, and Lillian so much for your time and for your graciousness in sharing your stories. I want to thank all of you who logged in tonight to spend this time with us. And I want to reiterate that you can continue to ask your questions. Specifically, if you have questions for me about the MDiv program, you can email ministrystudies@hds.harvard.edu. And that email address is also all over the website when you go to the MDiv program or ministry studies. And I will do my very best to get you answers to these incredibly important questions. Mostly, I just want to hope that all of you land in a place that allows you to flourish and thrive and pursue your own purpose, mission, and calling. If that's with us, then we'll be grateful to have you and we're excited to have you. And if this is not the place for you, we encourage you to go where your heart feels led and where you will be best served. So with that, we wish you a good night.